Hello and welcome to the next webinar with Sentry Hosting. We're having some technical difficulties, so stand by as we get Hans and Donata back here.
Hey.
Oh, there you are. I was like, it's okay, so we're live. I was just saying we were having some technical difficulties, but you're here now, so that's good.
So sorry about that.
Oh gosh, no worries. It's the internet, and people who are, tuning in here, they know exactly what's happening on the internet, so it is all good. Anyway, so welcome to we're kicking off the Sentry Hosting webinar series for 2021, and we're here to talk about privacy policy today. Welcome, Hans and Donata from Termageddon. How are you?
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're going to be digging ourselves out of the snow very soon here.
As well as the hole we put ourselves in for this technical issue.
Yeah.
So.
I know. I don't know how I'm coming across to you. I'm still hearing some pixelation in your voices, so hopefully that'll smooth out a little bit as we get going here.
Okay.
Yeah, but, it might just be the snowstorm because we have a lot of snow here.
It's real bad.
Yeah, it's snowing here too. You guys are outside of the Chicago area, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and you're in New York, right?
I'm in Rochester, New York, and it has been coming down steadily since about 8 a.m. this morning, so about 4 hours, and it's getting thicker and thicker on my car as the day goes by. So one thing I love about you guys is you're nerdy like me, but the passion comes through, and you're a heck of a lot of fun to spend time with too. So it's like the trifecta as far as the nerd quest goes. I hope you don't take offense to that.
No. Whenever we get a chance to speak, usually it's hours go by, and we just keep talking. I love it. So you're good people.
That's awesome. You too. And so today we're going to talk about privacy policies, which is it's one of those things that people sometimes don't even think about and don't think that they should include. And I'm just a small business, and it doesn't really matter. And I don't sell in Europe, so it doesn't matter there. And the truth is, it matters no matter who you are, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So privacy laws are unique. They protect consumers and not businesses. And because of how the internet works, they have very broad application because really anyone from anywhere could submit their personal information to your website. So you might be required to comply with some privacy laws that you're not even aware of. And that's our goal today, is to just give a broad overview so that people can get a general sense of what's going on and what they need to know.
And for those of you listening that are like, oh, well, I don't even collect information on my website, I very often find that not to be the case. Some modern websites collect information through contact forms, asking for name and email and phone number. Often those contact forms get shared. You share that data with a storage unit in your backup on your WordPress backend. When forms get submitted, they send emails to people. So most people are not only collecting personally identifiable information, they're sharing it. But I'm leaking too much into our presentation.
Yeah,
Maybe we should jump into it.
I just thought of a really great clickbait article. Don't think that you're collecting personal information. This presentation might just shock you.
I'm in.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you guys. Go ahead and share your screen. I'll add it to the broadcast. And I'm going to kind of take a step back. Anybody who's listening, please feel free to throw some comments and questions, and we'll make sure that we bring those up on screen. We'll interrupt them. I'm good at interrupting. So that we can ask your questions in real time for sure. And so here we go.
Great. So today we're going to talk about the 3 things all web professionals need to know about privacy. We're going to be debunking some myths, answering some of your most pressing questions, and giving you a great overview of the things that you really need to know without hopefully being too boring about it. So quick disclaimer before we start, Termageddon is not a legal services provider, and we're not providing legal services or legal advice to you today. We definitely recommend speaking to your own attorney about any compliance initiatives that you're interested in taking. This is just provided for your own information. And today we're going to talk about 3 things. So which websites need to have a privacy policy, why privacy policies are important, and why you should be the one to talk to your clients about privacy. And before we get into the more substantive portion of this, a quick introduction. My name is Donata. I'm a licensed privacy and technology attorney, licensed in Illinois, and I'm also a certified information privacy professional. I've been practicing in privacy for about 5 years now, and I'm the vice chair of the American Bar Association's e-privacy committee and the chair of the Chicago chapter of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And for my job, I'm the president of Termageddon, which is a privacy policy generator. And I'm the legal engineer behind the policy questionnaires and texts. And I'm responsible for keeping policies up to date with changing privacy laws. So a big portion of my day is being spent, especially now that the legislative sessions have just started, on tracking privacy bills, analyzing each bill and what they mean. And when privacy laws are passed, I go to work and make sure that policies are updated accordingly.
My name is Hans. I'm the vice president and co-founder of Termageddon. I am better known as Donata's husband, but I oversee sales and marketing and support at Termageddon. Prior to this company, I ran a 12-person web design agency for 7 years. I sold that company to go full-time Termageddon, and we work from our home in Chicago, Illinois. And the only thing I want to note is that the later part of this presentation is geared towards helping web designers understand the importance of website policies. But the whole breadth of this presentation is all about if you own a website, here are the things that are coming, especially in the US, with regard to responsibilities you may have when it comes to what you need to disclose legally on your website.
Yeah. All right, so let's get started on the first part, which is figuring out what websites need to have a privacy policy. So as Michelle said at the beginning, some people think that they need to sell personal information or they need to share it to need a privacy policy. Some people think that only e-commerce websites need to have one, and those just simply are misconceptions. So for the first part today, we're going to show you how you can easily determine whether your website or a website that you're building for a client needs to have a privacy policy. As a lawyer, I love definitions, but didn't want to bore you guys too much with that. So we included only one definition here, which is personally identifiable information, also referred to as PII. So what is PII? PII is any data that could identify an individual. Great examples of PII are names, emails, phone numbers, physical addresses. IP address is also included in the definition of PII. So all of those things are personally identifiable information. And any website that has a contact form collects PII. Now, you see here, this is an example from our own website. This is our Contact Us form, and a lot of websites have this. So it's basically a form where people fill in their PII and, present their comments or questions or concerns, and, you get that information and then you email them back, setting up a call or answering their questions. So here's a great example of a Contact Us form. And this form, as you can see, is collecting names and emails, which are examples of PII. So if you have a form like this on your website's collecting PII. Pretty easy, right? And then if you remember nothing else from today's presentation, this is the main takeaway for today. It's any website that collects PII needs to have a privacy policy. Notice it's not share, sell, use, it's just collect. So the moment that your website is collecting that PII, that's when you need to have a privacy policy. You don't need to share it. You don't need to sell it. You don't even need to use that information for any purpose. The moment that you collect it, that's when you need to have the privacy policy. So that was the first part, and we're done with that. So now you can easily tell whether your website or a website that you're building needs to have a privacy policy. All you need to do is check your website for forms. If you have a form that collects PII, you need to have a privacy policy. So let's move on to part 2. Maybe Hans can start us off on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I will note real quick, just to close up part 1, if you don't have a form, but you have website analytics tracking tools like Google Analytics, you may be collecting IP and sharing that IP with data analytics providers. The simple collection of IP addresses, yet again, another example. So even if you don't have a form, you still want to check to see if you have analytics tools or if you're collecting PII on your website in any other way possible.
So Hans, actually,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Interrupting it. So does collecting cookies, like having cookies, we know that most WordPress websites collect cookies, is that also considered PII?
So it depends what the cookie does. Most cookies, well, no, not most. Many cookies are used for tracking users, tracking their behavior on your website, and this is standard practice. This is to help you understand, how is my website performing? How do I give my users the best experience possible? So when a cookie is or a tracking pixel is implemented that tracks user behavior, it may be collecting IP and sharing that data even with third parties. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Yep.
Thanks.
And I have a question too. Yeah. So let's say I'm just like a lay person. I've never built a website in my life. I don't really know much about websites. How can I check to see if my website has Google Analytics? So
a great tool you can use, there's 2. One is called Wappalizer. It's a Chrome extension. So you have to use the Chrome browser to use that. But if you type in Wappalizer Chrome extension, and if someone needs a link, I'll get you a link at the end of this call. It's a great little tool where you can visit any website and see all the technologies used on that website, which is pretty nifty. And then there's also, I believe, a Google Tag Manager tracking pixel that you can find in the Chrome store, also free, which will give you insights into what type of Google tracking you have implemented on your website.
Can I also like right-click on the website and click inspect and then search for analytics?
You certainly can.
Okay. All right. Well, there you have it. If you're not sure if your website has Google Analytics, that's how you check.
Very nice. That's good stuff. We do this presentation a couple times. We've done this presentation a couple times.
This is a new question, though.
Yeah, it's nice to have some zingers.
I like to spice it up.
Yep. All right. So why does PII collection and privacy matter? The fact is that privacy laws are being introduced or already exist throughout the world, and they are all out to regulate the collection and use of PII. So privacy laws protect people of certain states, countries, or continents for that matter. And they are all saying, hey, if you're collecting PII from residents or citizens or people of this area, you need to go through our rule book of what you can do and what you need to say to people on all that information that you're collecting. So with these privacy laws out to protect the personal information of all these individuals, many privacy laws require you to make certain disclosures about what your website does in terms of the PII it collects, what is done with that PII, and with whom that PII is shared with. And I got to note, this is just a very high level of what these privacy laws require you to disclose. There's many unique features of what each and every privacy law specifically wants you to state or disclose. So please don't think of this as this is all you have to do. That's certainly not the case, and we can bring up some examples later if you'd like us to. But the key component here from this slide is to remember privacy laws regulate the collection and use of PII of residents or citizens of particular states, countries, and continents.
Yeah, and when you read a privacy law, which I'm sure everyone is going to do after this presentation, I'll call you after to make sure. I don't have to call them, don't worry. If you read a privacy law, it will have like a list of disclosures that you need to make. And those disclosures are made in the privacy policy. So that's where a privacy policy comes from. Usually, if you're doing it correctly, is you start off with figuring out what privacy laws apply to you. You read through each law, see what disclosures they require, and that's how your privacy policy is built. So there are several laws that are already in place that apply to the collection of PII by websites. I won't go through this one by one, but there are a few of these that I would like to highlight. So for example, or actually before I start on the examples, privacy laws protect consumers and not businesses. That's very important to remember. So privacy laws have a very broad application. They can apply to you if you collect the PII of residents of certain states or countries or continents. They can apply to you if you do business there. They can apply to you if you have an office there. They can apply to you if you are targeting people who are located in those states, countries, or continents. So you don't actually have to be located in any of these. Sorry, we have a dog barking. I'm sure it's mailman time now.
No worries.
I don't know what it is with dogs and mailmen. There's like just a hatred there. I don't know. And our mailman is super nice. So, but anyways.
Yeah, it's definitely a trigger.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So if you're not located in any of these states or countries, that does not mean that you're off scot-free and can go do whatever you want now. These laws can apply to people located outside of these areas. So one great example that I would like to give you is the California Online Privacy Protection Act of 2003, also referred to as CALOPA. So that law applies to any website that collects the PII of residents of California. Now, as you know, when you go to websites, you can submit your PII on any form, and so can others. People from California can go onto your website and submit their PII to you. There's nothing that, prohibits them from doing so. Therefore, CALOPA will apply to pretty much any website in the world. And that's the case with a lot of these. One question that we get a lot is GDPR. GDPR is a privacy law that protects the PII of residents of the European Union. It went into effect in 2018, and it was really, really a huge deal. A lot of people think that just because your website is accessible in Europe, GDPR automatically applies to you, and that's not the case. So just having a website that is accessible from the EU does not automatically mean that you have to comply with GDPR. Now, you do need to comply with GDPR if you are offering goods or services to residents of the European Union. So for example, let's say I sell headphones and I ship those headphones to the EU. That means that I offer goods or services to people located there. Or if you track the behavior of EU residents online. And that's where most websites get caught up in GDPR compliance. So if you have any type of analytics service, such as Google Analytics, or anything that tracks user behavior throughout your website, you're tracking the behavior of EU residents, meaning that GDPR needs to apply to you. Now, also what I would like to mention when it comes to these laws is that they are changing. So Nevada's privacy law was last amended in 2019. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The PIPETA law, which is Canada's privacy law, they're considering amending that to allow consumers to sue businesses directly for privacy law violations and collect on those cases. So just because these privacy laws are currently in effect does not mean that they are set in stone and that they're not changing. California Consumer Privacy Act is a great example of this. When a privacy law passes, the Attorney General of that state comes out with regulations that interprets that law and explains to you how you should comply with it. The CCPA regulations have been updated 4 times in the last year. So it's important to remember that these things are fluid and always changing.
So I want to kind of throw in here too is that you can block traffic from geolocations, right? So like if I have I built a website for a local dentist. They were getting all kinds of spam and attack from Russia. So we geo-blocked Russia. But that doesn't mean that people in Russia couldn't still use VPNs and enter information. So just because you may be geo-blocking certain regions doesn't mean you're still not beholden to the privacy laws from that region because you actually don't know where your traffic is coming from.
Yeah, so a couple points with that. Geo-blocking seems like a really great solution, but they still collect IP address to figure out where that person is from, which is PII. And if you have access to that PII, that could become an issue. And 2, privacy laws protect residents of certain states. So if I'm a resident of California and next week I travel to Iowa to enjoy the snow, that law, I would still be protected under California's law. So if I go to your website while I'm in Iowa, but I'm a California resident, I would still be protected, even if you are geoblocking California, for example. So
Right.
it's definitely. Sorry,
the best way to protect. No, sorry, I keep interrupting you. The best way to protect yourself is with the privacy policies, not trying to get around it by geoblocking or other kinds of sleuthing kind of ways to do it.
It's a brilliant concept. Don't get me wrong, but it's just eventually you're going to find yourself trying to hack your way into and ultimately just like, all right, maybe I should just get a privacy policy and move forward.
Exactly. Like the easiest answer is usually the best one.
No, I hear you though. I am of that mindset as a person. Like, how do I work my way around it? And trust me, there's always great ideas that come from that. But yeah, of course, eventually it does get to the point where it's like, all right, maybe it just is something I can just move forward with.
Yeah, and California is a huge economy too. I mean, they have a lot of people and they have a lot of money. So you might be losing on business if you decide to geo-block them as well.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, but even like the local dentist isn't going to be getting people like from California is what I mean. So like you could block every state and every place else and only allow traffic from New York, but somebody's VPNing in, or they've come to New York and they want an appointment, but they live in California. So I guess my point is don't trust anything but your privacy policies.
Well, yeah, and people are going to, always try to go the route of trying to avoid it. But yeah, eventually you get to the point, it sounds like you even got to, Michelle, which is, if privacy laws exist, they're exist to protect people. And rather than try to say, how do I avoid all this stuff, like maybe embracing it can actually help you with your business by showing that you respect people's privacy and showing that you took the time to showcase that. So I think that's also a good point, which I think we touch on later on today too.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that too, like other benefits of complying with privacy laws. But if you're interested in the fines and the consequences of non-compliance, penalties for not complying with privacy laws can range from $2,500 per violation to 20 million euros or more in total. Now, in this case, what do we mean by per violation? Do we mean per website? Do we mean per policy? In this case, per violation actually means per website visitor. So if your website has 100 website visitors from California per month and you don't have the compliant disclosures, the fine would be calculated as 2,500 times 100. And when it comes to calculating fines in Europe, they use a sliding scale. So, they take into account the severity of the violation, the lack of clarity in the law, and, how hard you try to comply. So they kind of have more like a sliding scale. So smaller businesses might be subject to lower fines, bigger businesses, higher fines. In the United States, the fine number is set and it does not change. So if you violated the privacy rights of one person and you're a solopreneur and you have, a very, very small business, all of that does not matter. Google gets fined the same amounts as the smaller business in terms of what the per violation cost is. So in the United States, the number is 2,500 times however many website visitors you had. And the 2,500 is a starting point. So some laws, such as California, allow those fines to go up to 7,500 per violation. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, other states are proposing their own privacy bills. So California and other states passed privacy laws, and consumers in other states were like, wait, I should get this too. This looks nice. So they went to their legislatures and started pressuring them to pass their own privacy laws. So this tracker is available on our website, on our blog at termageddon.com/blog. And it's really interesting because it's updated all of the time. And I know that because I'm the one who creates this. So in the last 3 weeks, I think I've updated this about 5 times. So this is always changing. There's always new bills being proposed. And I won't go into all of these at length because I don't want to bore anyone to death. But I do want to highlight some important points. So one, these privacy bills will apply to businesses that are located outside of that state. So you see all of these bills proposed by New York. Businesses in Illinois might need to comply with these as well because of the broad reach of privacy laws. All of these bills would require privacy policies to be updated, so new disclosures are going to need to be made. Some of these bills apply to large businesses only, so people who make over a certain amount of revenue, but most of these bills don't care about the size of your business. So for most of these bills, it doesn't matter how much revenue you make, how much PII you're collecting, how many employees you have, or any of that. They would apply to all businesses, large and small. Some of these bills would allow consumers to sue businesses directly for privacy law violations. This one's important, and if you've been tracking accessibility lawsuits, you'll kind of see what happens once consumers can sue. So in accessibility, lately it's become clear that consumers can sue businesses directly for violations, and we saw an explosion of lawsuits there because, you know, lawyers, and I'm a lawyer myself, but I guess some of my less scrupulous colleagues have decided to just go through thousands of websites and see whether they're compliant or not and add them to a lawsuit list. And that's what happens when consumers can sue businesses directly. And then lastly, these would provide consumers with certain rights. So the right to access the PII that you're collecting, the right to ask you to delete it, and so on and so forth. So any of these bills passing means an update to your privacy policy and, you know, potentially new consumer rights. So that's something to keep in mind.
Awesome.
Maybe Hans can touch on other reasons for caring about privacy.
Yeah, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to jump to the final one in the bottom right corner. You know, it's when it comes to complying with privacy laws, that's obviously of interest to most business owners or website owners, for that matter. You know, complying with laws is an important practice within any business. But the fact is, I also think there's a statement about saying it's the right thing to do as business owners. And as you'll see through the other sections, we kind of highlight the fact that more and more consumers are becoming interested in privacy. I'm reminded of the fact that just last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, the #1 trending item on Twitter was WhatsApp's privacy policy, and it got a huge backlash.
You know, they retracted that.
Did they?
Yeah, so they wanted to combine WhatsApp privacy policy with Facebook so they could share the data and monetize WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And, you know, they did this update, and then there's huge backlash. And, you know, certain states' attorneys general were saying, well, that's not going to work for us. We're going to take you to court for violating a Federal Trade Commission order. And, you know, somehow that update just disappeared.
Wow. Wow. So, yeah, I mean, talk about, you know, just the gravity of how much more important privacy is becoming to people. And I think just about everyone would agree that everyone deserves a reasonable right to privacy. And that's what all these laws are out to do. So, you know, rather than trying to avoid them, I would just say embrace them. And then all of a sudden it becomes a positive thing for your business rather than a negative thing. Like, demonstrate to people that you respect their privacy. There's a lot of data out there to say that this is a growing factor that people make when deciding on who to do business with. So that's the main part of this slide.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as consumers ourselves, when I buy something online, I want to know that my PII will not be sold and resold and resold again. And consumers can now tell when that happens. You know, they can tell that they provided their phone number to you, and then all of a sudden they're getting all these marketing emails that they never signed up for. So it's not good for business, but caring about it can be good for your business as well, meaning that, you know, you could potentially gain a competitive edge or reduce your sales cycle because you care about privacy.
We do have a question that came in, so I'm going to bring that up now. And Chrissy Pollock is asking, perhaps this will be answered later, but is there a way to add the policy that is better than another way? For example, widgets versus separate pages or pop-ups?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the way that you approach privacy in your business will depend on what privacy laws apply to you. But this is more like a general discussion that I will have. The main and most important part of a privacy policy is that it's clear and conspicuous on your website. That means that people can easily see it They can easily recognize it. They can easily understand that they click on that link and it takes them to the privacy policy. So if your footer is gray, do not make your privacy policy link slightly less gray. Make sure that it's easily visible on your site. So if you decide to put your privacy policy on the footnote of your website, do it in different color font than the surrounding text, making sure that it's accessible. Use larger font than the surrounding text, making sure that it's visible. And you can also consider using a different font to kind of bring people's eyes to it as well. And the second part of that is if you need to obtain consent for collecting PII, which even if you're not required to do so by law is probably the best practice anyways, on all your forms, make sure you have that little checkbox that says, I agree, I read and I agree to the privacy policy. And the words privacy policy should be hyperlinked to the actual privacy policy. Do not pre-check the box and do not allow the consumer to submit their PII to you unless they check the box and they agree to that. And then the last thing that I want to say about that is that most privacy laws require your privacy policy to be on a separate page than all the other documentation. So please don't combine your privacy policy and your terms of service together, because you will not be able to get consent and it will be very confusing to the consumer if you do so. So don't have like a legal notices page on your footer. Have a privacy policy page and have a terms of service page and have separate pages for whatever other policies you want to have. So that's really my advice. Make sure it's clear and conspicuous, get consent, and don't combine your privacy policy with other documentation.
And just to make sure we address like why have pop-up, like when I have it as a pop-up, there's accessibility concern on top of all the reasons that Donata disclosed. There's also accessibility concerns with pop-ups, so that's something to also take into consideration. It definitely should just have its own dedicated page. Add a hyperlink to it, as Donata explained, in the footer, and then go above and beyond, unless you have to comply with the law and you just have to do it, but add a checkbox on your form saying, I agree to the privacy policy, and require the users to submit that, to check that box.
Chrissy says, good to know, and thank you. Thank you, Chrissy, for your question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great question.
Great to hear there's someone who's still with us on this discussion of privacy policies.
It's just us and Chrissy now.
All right.
So, Chrissy, why should you be the one?
All right. So the final part is, why should you be the one to talk to your clients about privacy? So this is a little bit more geared towards the web designers who are listening in, but hopefully there's some takeaways for everyone to see here. So for web designers, the fact is you're in the business of helping create the contact forms, helping install the analytics tools, helping companies collect personal information so they can run their business more efficiently. They can be found online better. They can have a more interactive website. These are all wonderful features that web designers provide to their clients. We are just entering a new phase where copying and pasting a privacy policy for your client is now being looked at as providing zero upside for yourself and a whole lot of downside. It's probably not best to copy and paste privacy policies anymore because it is kind of a legal document. It's not kind of, it is a legal document. So, rather than copy and pasting privacy policies or downplaying them or not even discussing at all. As a former agency owner, before I, met my privacy attorney wife, I just wouldn't even bring up the discussion of a privacy policy. But you have to come and realize you're building the tools that are helping these companies collect personal information. You may be forcing that company to comply with multiple privacy laws. So rather than ignoring it or trying to avoid it, have a conversation. Because what it does is, first off, it makes you look proactive and professional rather than reactive and unprepared. Because what's going to happen when New York passes their bill and all of a sudden their citizens can sue any business anywhere for having a contact form on their website, and your client gets sued? They're probably going to come to you and ask you, what the heck? Why didn't you tell me about this? So get ahead of it. Be in the proactive era, not the reactive era. That's something that all web agencies can benefit from. Improve client retention and loyalty. That might sound like a stretch, but here's my reasoning. When I was an agency owner and clients would have these one-off questions like, how do I get, set up email communication from the website to MailChimp? Being able to provide insights is when you build that trust with your client, when you build that when you demonstrate to your clients that you have a knowledge base that goes far beyond the scope of just building a nicely designed website. So I believe that when having knowledge about the full range of what makes a website great, you build that trust, and therefore you build that client retention and loyalty. Help stand above your competition. I always say, in a scenario where two people are quoting out a new website project and all else is equal except one person's acknowledging the importance of website policies and the other person has no discussion of it whatsoever, if you're a professional business owner deciding between these two proposals, who are you going to talk to? I'm going to talk to the one talking about privacy policies. Like, why has no one else told me about this? And there's your chance to have a winning thought and something for them to consider, and give yourself that competitive edge.
Right. You're showing that you have their back, right? You're showing that, hey, I've got your back on this. We do have another question, so let me pull that up real quick in case. So Amanda's asking, are terms and conditions an aspect of a privacy policy, or are they different things?
Yeah, so terms and conditions, also referred to as terms of service, is a separate document. So the point of a terms of service is to limit your liability for things that are happening on your website. So for example, if you have links to third-party websites such as Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and somebody goes from your website to that website and gets a virus or otherwise gets injured, it can help protect you from liability. It can also help protect you from copyright infringement claims by providing your contact information so that anyone that has a copyright infringement claim can contact you directly and allow you to resolve that issue without getting sued. It can also answer commonly asked customer questions like refunds, returns, cancellations, all of that. And then if your website is allowing people to make comments on your website, it can help you make sure that your website is not full of really gross comments and that you keep your website a nice, clean place. So it helps you limit your liability and helps answer customer questions, but it's a separate document.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. Thanks, Amanda, for the question.
Yeah, great one.
Yeah.
Last but not least, protecting your agency. So, this is one thing that I really am trying to help web agencies understand, which is that when you're building these tools for your clients, you may be forcing them to comply with multiple privacy laws. Don't ignore it, embrace it, and have this discussion. Get it documented that you discussed it with them, because it's up to the business owner if they want to comply with laws. It's up to business owners to assess risks every single day. Let them be the ones to decide if they want to comply with privacy laws or not. Don't be the one to just hold back that information because you think they're too small or, oh, they're not that big of a deal. Like, they're becoming a big, big deal. And it's just, why would you? There's only downside in that scenario. Give your own business the upside it deserves and protect it by getting documentation on the importance of policies.
So Hans, I have a question.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm a web design agency or I'm a freelancer. I can't rattle off the names of all the privacy laws. What should I say to my clients? So I'm building a website. What should I say? Like, if I have no idea how to start this conversation, how do I start it?
I feel like you have an answer to this one, and
I do have an answer, and you better know how to read my mind because we're married.
All right. So what I would do is I would acknowledge I'm not first off, I would acknowledge I'm not a privacy attorney. I know that you're collecting personally identifiable information. I think you should look into getting a privacy attorney to review this for you, or maybe speaking with someone at a website policy generator.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's totally right. You don't need to know all of the names of all of the privacy laws. You don't need to have a printout of all the privacy bills. Like, nobody's expecting you to give a 3-hour lecture on what privacy laws are. I think all you really have to do is tell your clients, hey, look, we're building this website for you. It's collecting PII through these forms or through this analytics tool. I really think you should look into getting a privacy policy. And that's really a great way to protect yourself. Do it in writing. Even have your contracts include that, or have your client sign some type of a waiver that you let them know that they need this. And then it's really up to them to make that decision,
Absolutely. So when do you discuss talking about privacy policies? And for those of you who just own a website, you can always look at this as when should I be considering getting a privacy policy? So, before you undertake a new project, when quoting out projects, you can use that time to demonstrate that you have a vast knowledge of what makes a website great. So when doing it in quoting, you give yourself a competitive advantage. The next stage is before launching a new website. Right before you get that website ready to launch, have the discussion so that so that the owner of that website is fully aware of what's going to happen the moment after that site goes live. And then if you have maintenance clients, don't feel like they should be abandoned. The fact is when you built those sites years and years ago, privacy laws weren't as big of a deal as they are now. So to tell them about what is happening with privacy and that it's becoming a bigger deal and that there's many cost-effective ways to get policies added to your website nowadays too. And then last but not least, now, if you're in the middle of it, you own a website, don't just ignore it, because this is one of those things where you ignore it and then something happens 2 years down the road or something like that. And you're like, oh, I meant to do that 2 years ago. And it's like, it just doesn't feel good. So just get it done, move on.
So now that we talked about, privacy policies and why they're important, you might be questioning, where do I get a privacy policy if I want one? So option one for you is privacy attorneys. Privacy attorneys write privacy policies for their clients. Make sure, if you are going to use an attorney, make sure that you use someone who focuses their practice on privacy. A great way to find out if they are focused on privacy is if they have a certification in privacy. So look for the word CIPP or CIPM or CIPT behind their name. That means that they're certified in privacy by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. If you just ask your business attorney or your state attorney or your family attorney to write this, they might not be the most qualified people, because privacy is a very specific field with a lot of very specific knowledge that somebody needs to have. If you are going to be using a privacy attorney, make sure you ask them what their strategy is for keeping that privacy policy up to date when the laws change. If the attorney is looking at you like you just grew 3 heads, that's not the right attorney for you. And ask them if they're going to bill you extra each time that changes are made, so that you're sure that you're getting, what you're going to be paying for this in the future, because there are a lot of changes each year. So you want to make sure that you can afford those changes. Hiring a privacy attorney is a really good option for really big clients or clients that need special compliance, such as HIPAA or financial services compliance, things like that. Because it's a pricier option, not a lot of small businesses can afford it, unfortunately. But if you can, we definitely recommend that you go with a privacy attorney. Option 2 is a generator. A generator is a software as a service solution that asks you a series of questions and then uses your answers to customize your privacy policy so that it fits your business. Generators are usually faster and a more cost-effective solution and can work for the majority of your small business clients.
The con to the generator, because we're obviously, we run a generator together, but I like to always share a con. A con is that it's not a legal service provider. It's that's something to take into consideration. There's nothing that beats an attorney, but most people don't have 20 grand a year laying around to invest that type. So going with a generator that clearly has a focus on privacy laws and has the in-house expertise to, build the confidence for yourself, I think is a great alternative.
So we have some frequently asked questions that we get asked a lot during these presentations, but I think maybe it'd be better to go and see if there's any questions from you guys. And then, if we need to, we can talk about these as well. And here's our contact information too. And I'm sure Michelle will put that in the notes. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to reach out. We're always happy to help and answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, so we don't have any other questions queued up yet, but if anybody has questions, now's the time to post them in the chat. So I want to ask, there's a big difference between self-hosted and WordPress.com, or I don't even know what other blogging places there are. Like there used to be Blogspot and Blogger and all those different places. Do I have to worry about privacy policies if I'm building on somebody else's platform? I'm not talking about self-hosted. I'm talking about if I'm using Facebook as, I have a Facebook page and I'm building on there, or if I'm, using WordPress.com as a blog, but it's not self-hosted, so it's managed by WordPress. What are my responsibilities in those cases?
Yeah, so when you're collecting PII, your responsibility is to have a privacy policy. So that's something that we definitely recommend. Even if you're using WordPress, WordPress is not going to pay your bills for, if you get fined for privacy law non-compliance. When you build a website on other platforms, they make sure that you accept their terms of service, which always say that you're responsible for complying with all applicable laws, rules, and regulations that apply to you. So don't expect like WordPress or Facebook or any other platform to pick up the bill if you get into trouble or to get you out of trouble. You're going to be on your own. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, the general rule of thought is you need to know your contractual relationship with that company you're utilizing to share content online and collect personal information online. But yeah, the general rule of thumb is the big companies are going to be able to protect themselves, and that's what their objective is. And it then becomes your objective for the information you're planning to want to collect. So yeah, that's a good general rule of thumb.
Yeah, and it's not to say that those companies are bad for doing this.
No means.
They have to make sure that they have a functioning platform, which they wouldn't if they were liable for everything that was done.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's not like a slight against these companies. It's just something.
Not at all. Yeah. So you are always responsible for the information you're collecting and the information you're putting out there. No third party is responsible for that. It's on you as the content provider. That's right.
As the website owner. Yep.
Yep, exactly. Amanda says, thank you very much. There's so much information she didn't know. So thanks, Amanda, for tuning in and watching that. And Chrissy says that she doesn't have any other questions, but she's really grateful. And this is good info. And Chrissy does work for Automatic. So it's nice that she was able to tune in and kind of share the wealth and ask some good questions in here too. So she's my favorite happiness engineer, my favorite automatician, Chrissy Comics. So shout out to you, Chrissy. No offense to all the rest of you.
If we can get involved with Automatic in any way, like give us a holler. We're more than happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I know you guys are so super helpful. You're so happy to answer questions of people all the time. I've asked you so many questions. I've never gotten a bill. I'm not asking you to send me one.
I think all we send you is a coffee mug.
I know. I actually don't have a Termageddon coffee mug. I should have one for my podcast.
We're gonna get that fixed. We're gonna get that fixed.
That's right.
I
don't know if you've got one of mine, but we'll make sure that we get all that straightened away. But yeah, no, this is awesome. I really appreciate that you come on and you've worked with me on I think 2 or 3 other platforms. You've been to several of my meetups and we've only known each other a little over a year because we met at the last in-person WordCamp US. So I appreciate
Miami.
I appreciate you so much. And I'll let you share. So Chrissy says she will do. She'll circle back if she has any questions. Is there any parting thoughts that you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up here? And I do want to say that I know you all, I've invited you to write a blog post as well. So people can come back to centurycares.org and we will have a blog post from Hans and Donata about privacy. So if you haven't found this dry enough to be an entire webinar on it, then we got some reading for you in the future too.
I think my parting words to everyone would be, don't hide your privacy policy. Don't be that guy. Don't hide it beneath some fonts and colors that nobody can see. Allow consumers to understand what you do with their personal information. And allow them to find your privacy policy easily, answer the questions that they have about privacy, and allow them to move on with their concerns into buying from you or into engaging with you. Don't be terrified that somebody will ask you a question about their privacy. So if somebody sends you an email, says, hey, do you sell my PII? Don't panic and don't lose all sense. Be honest with the people who go onto your website and make sure that they can see your privacy policy, and this stuff should not be too stressful then.
Yeah, and one of the things I do want to point out too is the two of you never come on these things as a giant sales pitch. But you do offer this as a service. So if somebody's looking for privacy policies that are not static, but that are dynamic and will continue to update as the laws change, go to Termageddon.com, check out their pricing. I think it's $99 a year or something like that for a site. It is the cheapest, let's not say cheap, most inexpensive security blanket you will ever apply to your website. So I'll help you market if you won't. But Termageddon.com, check it out. They're obviously not the only player in the field, but you've got my websites because I trust you guys. So, and I interrupted you though, Hans. What are your parting thoughts?
And actually, since we last spoke, Donato was actually asked to run the meeting board. What is it called?
It's a working group for the American Bar Association, where we basically gave a report of what privacy laws should include, and that was sent to states and the federal government.
So she ran the whole thing, to teach legislators how to write privacy laws. So that's pretty cool. So, my part was privacy is becoming more important, not less important, and just rather than try, we have to admit that we can't. We have to admit the fact that this is the reality. It's becoming more important. So rather than trying to avoid it, just embrace it and move on and run your business, show and demonstrate to people you respect their privacy.
This last year so much of our lives have moved online that we're never as online before, right? So yes, in our industry, we definitely are online, but think outside of just web design. Schools have been hacked and their privacy information their private information has been shared. Doxing is huge right now. People are doxing people. Don't be the site that people find that information through for doxing other people. There's so much that we really need to think about more than ever before, because so much with the pandemic and everything else has moved us online. So, I want to appreciate not only the services that you provide, but the information that you share. And I'm just so grateful.
That's awesome.
Thank you for having us. This is really fun.
Awesome. Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you. And I know we had to reschedule, so thank you for rescheduling for today. And let's see. I should have done this. Let's see. There we go. Oops, wait. There we go. Now I got us better. Didn't cut off half your faces. So thank you so much for being here. We definitely will be posting in the next couple of weeks whatever blog post you'd like to share with us, and we'll share that out to the community as well. But again, thank you for sharing all that you know and your knowledge. I truly appreciate it, and thank you for
Thank you for having us.
We'll talk soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.